George, I was looking at the paper today, and you're in the above the fold in a doing a polar bear swim. So what was that all about?
Well, actually, it's something I've done. This is my 12th year doing the polar bear swim, and it's in Lake Erie. It's actually in Silver Creek, right next to the lake, because moving water, as most people know, doesn't freeze. So it's actually the water temperature is below freezing technically. In fact, they have a whole series of firemen and rescue outfits, these big heavy suits, and their job is to, as the water begins to freeze, to clear it out so we can stay clear. After they've chopped a big hole in the ice for us to, the surface ice to get through. It's exhilarating, and I can tell you after doing it as many times as I have that it's actually, the colder it is, the better. Probably the worst year we ever did it when it was about 40 degrees outside, because what happens when you first go into the water, when it's so cold, you numb up right away and then you don't feel it. But if it's the warmer the temperature of the water, it's actually, you feel it a lot more. So the trick is to get out before your joints freeze up. That's the key. But it's for great causes, I should say. And we raise money for Oshai Children's Hospital, the Silver Creek Food Pantry, the Silver Creek Rescue Squad, and the Sunset Bay Fire Department. So I was actually this year the high pledge getter, and I raised $1,400, and we raised about $7,000 total that day. So for a good cause. So, and when someone tells you to go jump in a lake, I can say, I already did it. So, yeah, exactly. So
I was doing a lot of research on you, George, and I called our good Chautauqua County Judge Dave Foley on the way up here, and he said that if anything about George Borrello that he remembers is that you were destined to be a county executive. Like, you seemingly were, even back in the good old grade school days, a guy who was always dressed well, primed well, and you reminded him of the TV character on Benson, who was the mayor. Now, is that true? Is that a true reflection?
I was quite a nerd in high school, and I did spend much of my junior and senior year, I wore a tie to school every day. Public school, didn't have to wear a tie, and carried a briefcase. So then, ironically, I spent most of my career not wearing a tie, and now I'm back to wearing a tie again. So, but yeah, it was, and Dave was a year ahead of me in school, and just a supremely nice man, and very smart, came from a great family, and we always shared a lot of good laughs. But his twin sister and I did musicals together at Fredonia High School. We were both in musicals and had various parts, and we were in Bye Bye Birdie back in 1984, and then 30 years later, they did Bye Bye Birdie again at Fredonia High School, and myself and Dave's sister Beth and a bunch of us that were in Bye Bye Birdie went back to go see it again, and it was a great experience to sit there and watch all these kids who look so young now compared to us do Bye Bye Birdie again with a group of people that I was on stage with 30 years earlier. So
biographically, where were you born?
Technically born in Dunkirk at Brooks Hospital, but spent the first few years of my life in Silver Creek. Then my parents got divorced, and my mother moved my sister and I back to Fredonia. So I consider Silver Creek and Fredonia both my hometowns. But I did go through school, kindergarten through graduation at Fredonia High School.
The world of politics is not something that is unique to the Borrello family. In fact, you have some legacy there, right?
Yes, in fact, there is right now, actually right where I was jumping in the lake on Sunday is George Borrello Park, which is named after my grandfather, who was mayor of Silver Creek and trustee before that, and he died while in office, and they named the park after him. Early in my career, the park's been named after my grandfather for a long time, and people say, "Well, you have a park named after you?" I'm like, "Yes, I did such a great job my first year as a county legislator. They've already named a park after me." But obviously named after my grandfather. And my father also was trustee, and I've got other family members that have been involved in local politics. However, have been since day one a Republican, and all my family are Democrats. So I was the rebel to be a Republican.
Why were you a rebel? Were you a rebel with a cause?
Just a rebel. I grew up with during the '80s with the TV show Family Ties and Alex P. Keaton. So he taught me to be a conservative on TV. So.
Who was your role model? I mean, you're growing up. You're in your formative years. You're a self-described nerd with a tie and briefcase, which kind of drew attention to yourself.
Yeah.
But was there a political hero in your world?
I grew up during the Reagan era, and I would have to say Ronald Reagan. And I can tell you, growing up in the '80s and the '70s, and this is maybe not everyone's attitude, but growing up earlier in my young years in the '70s during the Carter administration, and Carter went on to be a very good post-president, a very good retired president. But during that presidency, not through his own fault, but through various circumstances, we had the worst economy in decades. We had high inflation and high unemployment. We created a new term called stagflation, and then all of a sudden Ronald Reagan came along. But I grew up in an era when we were told very young that America, you can't say America is the greatest country on earth, and our system of government is different than other systems of governments. And Ronald Reagan came along and said, no, it's okay to say this is the greatest country on earth. It's okay to say that that we stand up for what's right. And he made us proud to be Americans again. And then going into my high school years when he was president, he was a hero because he stood fast. And you may not have liked his opinion or his politics, but you had to respect the man and the fact that he, and in today's political climate, to look back at a guy like Ronald Reagan, the man who had principle and stood for something, and unwavering, moral fortitude is something for great respect. And you look at the climate in Washington right now, and whether you're a Republican or a Democrat or a liberal or conservative, you have to look at that and just be ashamed of what you see there. And that was something that was the antithesis of Ronald Reagan. That's why he was, in my opinion, a great role model.
You went to Silver Creek High School?
Actually, Fredonia.
Fredonia High School?
Yes.
What year did you graduate?
1985.
1985, and then where you went?
Went to Purdue University and graduated there in 1989.
Did you want to be an engineer? No,
it's funny. People always say, certainly Purdue was an engineering school, and everybody knows it for that. But at the time when I was researching colleges, it actually was one of the top business schools for undergraduate, and really an excellent school, the Krannert School of Management. So that's why I chose Purdue. I actually graduated with a dual degree in economics and political science.
Did you run for office out there? Or
No, I was chairman of the College Republicans for 2 years.
So while you were in college, did you learn some skill sets which helped you set up your top shelf marketing businesses?
That was something I kind of fell into. My focus was economics, and I wanted to be in finance. And but after college, I spent a little bit of time in Chicago trying to get a job. Maybe as a trader or a stockbroker, and that didn't pan out. I went back home, and I went to work for some guys that owned some restaurants and nightclubs in the Buffalo area. I think I'll do this for a little while, and then maybe head back to Chicago after the end of the summer, and then kind of stumbled across some opportunities. And while I was looking for marketing and promotional ideas for the bars and restaurants, one of the things I had seen over in Canada was girls walking around at this bar that had glass test tube shots, and they were selling shots in these glass test tubes. And it was actually at a place right in Fort Erie. And I said, this is neat, but the places that I work with can't use glass, so I wanted to find plastic test tubes to use as shot glasses. And found a place, a medical supply company that supplied them for me, and then I found a company that could screen print the logos on the shot glass, on the test tubes, and then created some racks to hold them, and started using them at the 3 nightclubs that I was involved with as the head of the marketing. Then some other bar owners said, "Hey, those are great. Where can I get those?" And I'm like, "I'll sell them to you." So that's how I started my company at 22, and then I grew that company to a pretty substantial business, and work with some of the top liquor brands in the United States. Work with companies like Sidney Frank Importing, which was Jägermeister, and Jim Beam Brands, which had a bunch of products. And I grew that company, and then at 30, I merged my company with another company out of Connecticut called Progressive Specialty Glass, and we've dealt with some of the top hospitality companies in the world, casinos, cruise lines, restaurant, hotel chains. If everybody's seen a show on CNBC called The $1 Billion Buyer. I don't know if anybody's ever seen this. It's Tillman Fertitta is the owner of the Landry's Restaurants. They were our biggest customer, my personal customer that I handled myself. So Tillman Fertitta and I, so the guy that's on that show on CNBC was my customer. And we did a lot of work, and I retired September 1st of last year, but in the 5 previous years, 3 out of the 5 previous years, we were Landry's Restaurants, got the award for their #1 vendor, their top vendor, which was so that was, I'm very proud of that, because, when you're dealing with a company that large, $3.5 billion in sales, over 500 restaurants, household names like Morton's, and Joe's Crab Shack, and other Golden Nugget casinos, you have a target on your back every day when you're working with a company like that. Everybody wants to do business with them. So I'm very proud that we were not only a vendor for a long, long time, but also considered one of their best vendors.
So I'm visualizing you at Purdue at some sort of social fraternity party, and those guys, Ralph may remember these things, that's why he got in as a physician, but those beakers, you'd walk around with beer full of beakers, and did any of that?
That was inspiring, yes, absolutely. And I was also in a fraternity, and I was the social chairman, so definitely had to focus on.
What was your fraternity?
Phi Sigma Kappa.
Any other skill sets you picked up in that fraternity?
Not that I can talk about on record. So. Anything else you want to know? I did meet Ronald Reagan, by the way. I got the chance to meet Ronald Reagan. That was a big highlight for me at Purdue. So I wrote a letter to Ronald Reagan, just talking a little bit about myself and about the college, and this was actually right around the Iran-Contra situation. So he was, it was kind of a difficult time for him, and just invited him to come to Purdue, and a few weeks went by, and I lived in a fraternity house. We all had a common phone, and one of my fraternity brothers ran into my room. It's like, the president of the college is on the phone. What's this about? So I go downstairs. Steve Beering was the president of the college at the time. Now, there's 40,000 students at Purdue. The president of the college doesn't typically just call somebody at random. And he said, "George," he said, "did you send a letter to Ronald Reagan?" I'm like, "Am I in trouble for this?" And he said, "No." He said, "Well, he's coming to Purdue." I said, "Really?" And he gave me the whole rundown. And I found out later that our high school principal, Tom Heary, who's since passed away in Fredonia, that they actually, Secret Service had called him to do a background check on me. And Ronald Reagan came to Purdue, and when I was, again, chairman of the college Republicans at the time, and it was amazing. We have our own airport at Purdue, and Air Force One landed right there. And we were all on the tarmac, and there was all a bunch of us in line. It was the governor of Indiana, and the mayor of Indianapolis, and all the other dignitaries all the way down the line. And it was 2 o'clock, the plane was supposed to land, and 2 o'clock on the nose, that plane touched down at our airport at Purdue. And the big staircase, just like you see on TV, and there's Ronald Reagan walking down the stairs. And I'm at the very end of the line of all these dignitaries, and there's some person standing next to him who was whispering in Reagan's ear, telling him who each person was as he's coming down the line. So he finally gets down to me, and the guy whispers in his ear, he says, "You're George Borrello, the guy that wrote the letter." I said, "Yes." And he grabbed my shoulder, shook my hand, he goes, "You'll be a good broad-shouldered politician one day." And that was my experience with meeting Ronald Reagan. So,
Did you sign it as chair of the Republican Party or social chairman of the fraternity?
Yeah, I had to go with the Republican Party at that point. So the college Republicans more legitimate.
So I love you. Your business career, your entrepreneurship, dealing with the hospitality, tourism. What did you learn? What kind of skill sets did you develop which would transfer into being a county executive?
Well, I think anytime when you're in business, you learn a lot of basic skill sets. I think that, and one of them is survival, and dealing with the myriad of challenges that you face. But we have a very strong hospitality and tourism industry here in Chautauqua County, and I truly believe that we need to grow it even further. I think Chautauqua Institution is obviously a world-class, world-renowned place, and I don't think the average person in Chautauqua County understands that. And I also think that the folks inside those walls don't spend enough time outside those walls actually enjoying the other things in Chautauqua County. So I'm hoping we can help improve that, and I do believe Michael Hill that he believes that as well. And hopefully there'll be opportunities for us to share Chautauqua more with the local community, with the people that visit here that may not know about Chautauqua Institution, and the fabulous things that go on there. At the same time, share a little bit of the rest of the county with those folks that come here for the season, especially. So a little bit of a tangent there, but I think having experience, government and business are not the same things. You can't run government like business, because in business you take the quickest, most logical path from point A to point B. In government, it doesn't work like that. You've got all these special interests and everything else that you have to weave your way around, but you can still apply business principles to government, and that is one of my goals. So you ask what the skill sets are, and that is I guess thinking more critical thinking and thinking more efficiently, and doing those things that ultimately will make little changes that add up into big changes.
So the first thing you're going to mention to President Michael Hill is the fact that, based on your extensive background in test tube drinking, that you, County Executive Candidate Borrello, proposes hops growing incentive program.
Yes. Yes, that was one of the things something I've talked about for a couple years as a legislator, so grapes and the grape market, particularly commodity grapes like Concords, which are grown here in the county, especially in North County, that's unfortunately a declining industry, a declining business. Hops happens to grow quite well in the same situation as Concord grapes. And hops is a growing industry. It's obviously with the craft beer industry continuing to grow, there's an opportunity there. And I would, rather than waiting until things get to be a crisis mode, I'd like to start trying to convert some of our farmers to hops, and not just we're not looking for commodity hops like you'd get from the Pacific Northwest, things that go into your typical Budweiser and Coors. We want to create specialty hops here that would command a higher price, far above a standard commodity rate, so they can convert those acreages to something more profitable. But one of the challenges there's a couple challenges they face. One of the challenges that's faced is that if there are a few people experimenting with hops, including Cornell Cooperative Extension, the problem that you face is that hops has to be used right away, or it has to be processed. It has to be processed into these pellets. Well, so what I'm proposing is that we develop a local hops and barley co-op right here in Chautauqua County. And now that'll accomplish two things. First of all, it'll allow the farmers that are growing the hops to bring them to one central location to have them processed, and then we would create an aggressive marketing campaign to market a Chautauqua-grown hops product. And then there is a woman right now that's selling hops to a brewery in downtown Buffalo for about 5 times the market rate of hops, because the quality of what she's growing is consistent with the brand that they're trying to create. So we want to put together this co-op, not only to have a place for them to bring their hops and pelletize it and then have us market it, but also what we've heard from the the brewers and craft distillers is that we can't really do business with individual farmers because there's not enough supply there and a consistent supply. There's challenges with crops like hops, mildew, other things. So if one farmer commits all of his crops to one brewer, and then all of a sudden he has a problem with mildew or something else, that's going to ruin the supply chain. So by creating a co-op, we'll have a much larger supply and a more consistent supply. And beyond that, there's a great story to tell here from the marketing standpoint. And that New York State used to be, #1 in growing hops in the post-Civil War era, and from the Civil War until about Prohibition. There are actually people right now that are looking to find ancient vine hops here in Chautauqua County, hoping that they can find them growing wild somewhere. And if that's the case, and they can then breed off of that, ancient vine that they can find, we can really create a brand around that. Anybody that knows wine knows that you have old vine, ancient vine, particularly Zinfandels. You always hear old vine, Zinfandel. We could create that same brand and quality in hops. So I'm hopeful that that's something that we can not only help our farmers, but also help our economy in general, and really create something unique and special that we right here based in Chautauqua County.
So you graduate from Purdue in 1989. Mm-hmm. In 2010, you're elected a legislator for the first time. Mm-hmm. What did your wife Kelly say when you said, "Hey, guess what? I'm going to run for county legislature"? Kelly was always supportive. I was always one of those people that would watch TV and kind of look at what's going on, or read the paper, or just see what's going on, and you get frustrated, and so everybody, I think most people that get involved in politics do it for one of two reasons. One is that they feel this is a path to some kind of fame and fortune, which is just not the case, or it's because they're genuinely concerned, frustrated, whatever you want to call it, with the conditions, and they want to try and change them. That's kind of why I got involved. I wanted to try and see if I could affect change. Either you're part of the solution or you're part of the problem. And I chose to try and be part of the solution. So she was supportive of that for that reason. You've sort of gravitated, in my observation of it, George, toward the economic development side, the tourism destination side, to the point where you became head of your chairman of the Economic Development Committee, and then which puts you on the board of the County of Chautauqua Industrial Development Agency.
Yeah.
We have in the back row, trying to hide, the chairman of the board. Do we have anything to say about Mike Metzger?
Yeah, he has been great to work with. If you're looking for something controversial, I'm not going to give it to you. Mike, you've been great to work with, and really a great leader at the IDA. We were talking about this earlier. The IDA has done great things, and I don't think most people in our county know that. Because it is the #1 target politically whenever you go through a campaign, and it wasn't during this campaign also. And it's easy to kind of play that class warfare card. This IDA board is just made up of a bunch of rich people that are figuring out ways to help their friends, and that's always the card that they play. And they've been doing that since the IDA has been in existence. And I can tell you that great things have been done, and good people like Mike volunteer their time, and they take the punches that are laid out every day, especially during campaign season, and they persevere. So thank you, Mike, for doing that, and everybody else on that board. It's a thankless job, and thank God we have you guys.
Well, he lives in Chautauqua here. He's a Chautauquan.
Yes, I'm aware of that. A relatively new Chautauquan. Is that correct? Is that yes? Yeah.
And the only other guy that is back there the only other guy aside from you who wore a tie was Rich Dixon. Did he do that in tribute to you, do you think?
Yeah, he did it because we had some visits to go to today, and we had to wear a tie. So we did some business visits. Yeah, in fact, how many different, 3 different hard hats today, Rich?
Yeah, 3 different airplanes.
Yeah, exactly.
Took all my rings off.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, he was not going to prison, by the way. We had to take his rings off. So it was, yeah.
Well, talk about the segue, but you and Rich have made a commitment to your first 100 days of office to do what?
Visit 100 businesses and organizations in the first 100 days. And that's today is the 9th of January, and we had our 10th business visit today. So we're keeping the pace. because obviously the weekends still count in the 100 days, so we got to do more than one in a work day. So.
What's your observation so far? They made 10% of their visits, and what?
Well, here's the thing. There's this feeling that we don't have jobs here, and we don't have good-paying jobs, and that's just not the case. Every single business we've been to, and these are, so far have been pretty big businesses, some of the biggest in Chautauqua County. They all have open jobs, and these are not minimum wage jobs. We're talking good-paying jobs, far above the average salary in Chautauqua County, with benefits. The problem that we have, there's a few problems, is that we don't have a skilled workforce that can do these things, and that's the challenge that we have to face. I firmly believe that after the first 100 days, that we're going to probably find that just in those 100 businesses that we've visited, and by the way, we started with a list of 2,000 to get down to 100. So in those 100 businesses that we visit, we will likely see, I'm going to guess, 300 to 500 open positions available right now. Good paying jobs. So we need to get away from you just need to go out there and recruit new businesses and bring them here and bring in, we have jobs here. And the question we're going to have to ask ourselves is, why are these jobs going unfilled? And we're already asking that question. And we already kind of knew that beforehand, but to hear it now and specifically is something we have to address. And first and foremost is we have to do better communication. We have to communicate the folks that are seeking jobs with the people that have positions to fill. That's the low-hanging fruit. And I guarantee you that we'll be able to do some of that. We've already had that conversation. Secondly is we have to do a better job of having our high school and college institutions creating curriculum that match the jobs that are here. One of the things that's needed pretty much everywhere is welders. Well, JCC graduated recently in their class 42 forklift operators and 2 welders. So they need to do, I don't want to say a better job, but we need to, maybe that is the word to use, better job of counseling these kids into which direction to go. Also, we have to look at the fact that we have great resources here like P-TECH and the WIB and all these other things, but we have to start communicating that. A lot of these businesses have no idea what those services are offered. They haven't had those conversations with these businesses, and the businesses haven't been able to sit down and talk with them. So we got to just start doing a better job of network and communications. That's going to be number one, to fill those positions as quickly as possible. And then we're going to have take a really good, honest look at our training programs and what we need to do to change those as quickly as possible. We want to tell kids that you need to go to a 4-year college and graduate and then go on from there. But the reality is that's not necessarily the what's best for every young person, and rather there's opportunities for electricians, plumbers, millwrights. I mean, the list, and it's a very consistent list from these 10 businesses that we visited, that they need them right now. They're good paying jobs, and they want help trying to fill those jobs. So we're going to do that. In the end of the day, if we come up with 500 jobs that are open right now, what would we do at the IDA and at the county to attract a business with 500 new jobs to Chautauqua County? We give them all kinds of things. We give them tax abatements and incentives and low interest loans, and we bring in the state. We have those jobs here right now. And without offering any more incentives and not spending any more taxpayer money, we can do that. So we need to do that. We need to, again, this is applying a business principle. Let's find out what the needs are. Let's be a good listener, and then let's do our best to pick the low-hanging fruit by filling those jobs that are currently here in Chautauqua County. We talk about keeping our kids here, but what are we really doing to do that? This is something we can do, and with relative ease compared with trying to bring in a company from somewhere else with 500 new jobs. So we're gonna pursue that and pursue that aggressively.
As part of your role, George, in the legislature, you were really in a leadership capacity. I saw it personally and certainly read a lot about it, which led to Chautauqua County being named one of the 6 statewide finalists in the New York Department of State's Municipal Consolidation and Efficiency Competition. What's your sense? Because you really beat the drum for that. Has the municipalities been able to get a sense of responding, or is there dialogue now going on? Well,
first of all, we're still in the running for that grant at the state level, which would be a game changer for us. Part of that exercise was to get 23 different municipalities to work together in Chautauqua County for this grant application, I thought it went well. And there is better communication, yes. And if we do get this $20 million prize from the Municipal Consolidation and Efficiency Competition, it'll afford us a quantum leap forward in government consolidation efforts in Chautauqua County. And one of the questions that was asked of me, is what do you think the number one challenge that faces our county? And that is we have too much government here. We're 130,000 people in Chautauqua County. We're smaller than the size of Amherst, and yet we have 27 towns. We had 15 villages. Now we're down to 13 with the dissolution of Forestville and Cherry Creek. We have 2 cities, and we have 42 fire districts. In 18 school districts. We have 500 elected officials in Chautauqua County. 500, most of which run unopposed. When we were involved with the issue in the crisis in Forestville, where they were facing a 455% increase in their taxes, people said, well, the mayor this, the mayor that. I said, look, he may not be the best guy for the job, but he's the only guy that wanted it. So that's because we have far too many elected officials, and really it's a challenge when you have that many layers of government. Not only is it very costly, but it also creates a very poor situation for economic development because businesses will take risk, but they won't take unpredictable risk. And unpredictable risk occurs when you are coming to right here in Mayville. As a matter of fact, I can give you a perfect example. The Webb family wanted to build this fabulous new hotel on the water. And this was about 18 months ago. And they went through all the hoops and spent all kinds of money, and you had to start with the state and then the county and the county IDA, and then you had to go to, from there you had to go to the town and then the village and then the village board and then the zoning board and the zoning board of appeals to get this project done. Well, every stop along the way is an opportunity for your project to be derailed. And it got through all those 7 layers, and then we got to the bottom of the 7-layer cake, and it was the zoning board of appeals. A bunch of well-meaning people, but with really no skill set to determine, the variances that were needed, that summarily struck down every variance, and the project died there at that moment. Now, most businesses would walk away and lick their wounds and not come back, but luckily we had the Webbs who took their $50,000 in plans and threw them in the garbage and started over again, and they're now went through the process again. I'm happy to say after the modifications that they did get those variances. But that's not the story that normally happens. You're trying to attract a business from outside. You're already asking someone to come to the most difficult, most hostile state in the country to do business. And now you're asking them to come to an area where you're going to roll the dice 7 times before you're going to decide if your project's going to move forward. That's the problem with too much government, is that it creates an unpredictable and hostile environment for developers. If we want to bring more business here, more development here, we need to reduce the layers of government that we have here.
George, as part of that belief of the number of layers of government, if you're a regular taxpayer, you believe it and you see it visibly. The county legislature sort of took it upon themselves and then ultimately through a referendum to reduce its size from 25 to 19. How have you seen that impact play out in the legislature, which now you're the county executive?
Mm-hmm. When I first became a legislator, we had 25, 2010. We had it was a 13 to 12 split, Democrats and Republicans, and it was an incredibly contentious time and very political. I remember, driving home after the second meeting, calling my wife and just expressing my frustration. We were more concerned about strategizing against what the other side was doing than doing the work of the people, and that was very frustrating. And I can tell you now that we're 180 degrees from that, and part of that was downsizing the legislature from 25 to 19. It changed the districts, and it forces people. You can't hide. You can, when you're in a group of 25, it's easy to hide and throw rocks from the from behind the curtain. It becomes harder the smaller the size becomes, and the larger your district is, the more responsibilities you have, the less time you can spend strategizing for political reasons. But also we really with that change, it also brought a change in a lot of the seats and the people. And we have a great group of people in our legislature, and I can tell you that we operate in a very nonpartisan manner. And since the last 4 years, out of the hundreds of things that we voted on, I can only tell you once that I remember where we had a vote split down party lines. That speaks to the fact that we all work together. It's not about politics or strategy or even self-aggrandizement. It's about what can we do best for the people. And we've gotten things done. We lowered property taxes 4 years in a row. We have a structurally balanced budget. We have a lot of good things going on in new development. So that came out of the fact that we started talking about to other municipalities about, well, you need to share services, consolidate, share services, downsize. And they look at you going, well, don't throw stones from a glass house. So we started by downsizing our own government first, and then talk to everybody else about doing the same thing.
George, we are on Chautauqua Lake. These are Chautauquans here who prize their institution. But part of what we realize that is the greatest asset we have here is Chautauqua Lake. Lots of press, of lots of very well-intentioned stakeholders, including the Chautauqua Alliance, which was created by the legislature. Linda's a member.
Mm-hmm.
Do you get a sense of where we are today?
Yeah, it's like you said, a lot of well-meaning folks. First of all, the lake is an incredibly valuable asset for here at Chautauqua County. It's approximately 1% of the land mass that surrounds Chautauqua Lake, but is about 26% of the property taxes. So, clearly a very important asset that we have to protect. Secondly, is that you're dealing with a lake, a eutrophic lake, that is already high in phosphorus levels to begin with, and essentially, to put it in simple terms, it's a lake that wants to become a swamp over a long period of time, so you're already fighting Mother Nature, and then we have the man-made causes that are adding phosphorus and nutrients and pollutants to the water that have accelerated that process, I guess my sense is that we're finally starting to get our arms around the fact that we have to stop treating the symptoms and we have to start treating the disease. And the disease is the flow of nutrients into the water in Chautauqua Lake. And it's something the county has been focused on quietly behind the scenes for a long time with the Soil and Water Conservation District and doing better land management with agriculture, stream bank stabilizations, doing all those things that we can to reduce the flow of nutrients into the water. That is the solution to the problem. Reducing the phosphorus load is the solution to the problem. Whether it's cutting the weeds or killing the weeds, that you're just treating the symptoms and not the disease. And the challenge that we face is that it's not sexy to go to a farm and talk about keeping animals out of the water, but it's easy for a politician to point to a barge in the middle of the lake and say, hey, look what I'm doing for you. This is where your money's going. But the real problem is that we have to reduce and eliminate really the man-made causes of phosphorus in the water, and that's sewering the lake. That's holding people responsible for failing septic systems. It's holding landowners responsible. And it also it involves the participation of the people who own homes around the lake. It's very nice to have a golf course quality lawn all the way to the water's edge, but that's not good. It's you need to have buffer zones. So you need to have these other things that stop the flow of nutrients in the lake. And to ask the people of Chautauqua County to participate financially in solving that problem when you have people that aren't willing to do something as simple as putting a buffer zone in on their land is not fair. So everyone needs to participate in the solution, and that's where I think it needs to start. And I know the Institute has done rain gardens and other things to help stem the flow, working in a sustainable manner. So that's great. Unfortunately, that's one part of the lake. And the rest of the shoreline, not so much. We don't see that participation. So we need to have a conversation, an honest conversation, about how everyone can participate to help solve this problem, because it's a huge problem. It's not just Chautauqua Lake, it's lakes all around the United States. I live on Lake Erie. We're very fortunate to live in a part of the lake that's clean, but you look down to the western basin of Lake Erie and the harmful algal blooms that they have there, and the fact that in 2014 2017, the city of Toledo lost its water supply for 4 days because of a harmful algal bloom. It tells you this is not an easy problem to solve. So we all have to work together. We have to put aside the rhetoric and the egos and have an honest conversation about what we can do to address this in a unified manner.
Something fairly new in the nomenclature of the county executive and the county legislature is a concept called tourism destination. Though we've had a tourism bureau, we've had all kinds of things, but as far as it being a talked about, focused part of the economic development toolbox, it's relatively recent.
Mm-hmm.
What's your sense of that as a priority?
Well, I think anything, again, tourism I think is a fabulous thing, and having to work within those bounds of understanding that there are people out there that are working against that, who feel that tourism jobs are not real jobs, which is a falsity, and that the people that are saying, I don't want a hotel built because I might lose my view of the lake, and I don't want anything to change because you know what, I don't have a vested interest in change. Then it's a challenging thing. So to be a true tourism destination, and to truly be focused on that and understanding the metrics of that and the potential economic impact, and everything from sales tax to our job rate to property values to everything else is a tremendous focus. So we are a destination for so many people for so many reasons. Now we have to share that as much as possible with as broad a group as possible to maximize that. Hopefully that answers your question.
I think the biggest question I have is, what's the question you expected me to ask you tonight that I haven't?
Thank God I wasn't, what do you weigh? So I guess the question you might have asked, suspect you would have asked is, what do you expect to see in 4 years? So now you want me to answer that question?
Sure.
Okay. Now that I've done your job for you? No. I hope that after the end of 4 years that I'll be able to say that we have reversed the cycle of population loss and reversed the cycle of job loss in Chautauqua County. And I hope that we can look around our community and say that we have created a situation where people want to live here, they want to raise their family here. The people that may have left Chautauqua County want to come back. I traveled for a living for a long, long time. And there was virtually no place in the United States you couldn't go where you didn't know or get the chance to meet people that were from Western New York. And every single one of them would love to come back, at least the ones that I've met. None of them, there's always, I'm heading to Florida, I'm never coming back. The reality is that's just not the case. Most people would love to come back, but they need some basic things here, and we have to work hard to do that, to keep our kids here, to bring those people back. I'm one of those people that came back. I lived in Williamsville for a long time, and I could have lived anywhere, but I chose to move back here. And every morning when I wake up and look out the window at Lake Erie, I remember why. So we need to give more people that unique experience. You can live in a former field that's a bunch of tract homes in a circle looking at each other. You can come to Chautauqua County and have the most beautiful vistas that you can see anywhere. We need to share that story and that vision with other people.
Got a few more minutes. Any questions anybody might have?
Treated this as a reluctant obligation versus an asset that it is. And if you read anything in the paper recently, this is truly how I feel. Again, you're talking to a guy that flew 75,000 miles last year, and I can tell you this: that as a frequent flyer, it's there is nothing better than being able to have an out-of-town meeting and come home the same day and sleep in your own bed. And right now, the very first day, the day after the election, the first thing that I did was I called a meeting at the airport with the airline, and I sat with them along with the current county executive at the time, Vince Horrigan, the mayor of Jamestown, and several others. And I said, I said quite candidly to the representative from the airline, I said, you have one advantage with me over everybody else in this room. I'm the only guy you haven't pissed off yet. And so here's an opportunity for you. and it was true, because what they said in that room about their past history with that airline was pathetic. And what I said to them is that the first thing we need to do is you need to have an airline or an airplane based here, because an airplane that based here means we can have a 6 or 7 a.m. flight, and then the last flight back, at 6 or 7 o'clock at night, we'll be back here that night. And what that will allow is, first of all, it'll allow business travelers to travel to Pittsburgh and back. Instead of a 6-hour round trip, you can do it in a much more convenient flight and have a meeting and come back. And we have this new relationship with UPMC, with our WCA hospital. There's people going back and forth all the time. That alone would be an opportunity if we could have a consistent schedule. So that's number one. Number two is an interconnect agreement, which they have promised us they have with a major air carrier. So you could drive to Jamestown, park for free, walk a few feet from the parking lot to the terminal, stand in line, check your bags here in Jamestown, go through a security line with 6 people instead of 6,000, and then connect in Pittsburgh to any place that major air carrier flies. That to me is a tremendous, as a business traveler, that's a tremendous convenience. And even for leisure travelers, same thing. So we can do those things. And it's my plan to have the people in this region understand this will be a better, more convenient, and cost-effective way to travel. We hope we can achieve that.
By the way, for signage and for purposes of publicity, you need to know that it's known as the Robert H. Jackson Field.
Absolutely.
We haven't used that. So once that is played, Mr. County Executive, life will change.
Yes.
Just saying.
A rose by any other name would wither and die. So yes.
With that pronouncement, I'd like to thank George Borrello for spending time here. Let's give a big round of applause.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.